So I want to have a video talking about the experience of getting back into these Cox slot cars. Now these were made in the 60s, so they're all old, but they're super cool. So I have a bunch of videos that I've made lately, restoring a couple of them, these fairly rare Chaparral 2D ones. And, I really want to talk about the joys and frustration. So I was lucky that, within a month's time, 3 of these pretty rare Chaparral 2D models made by Cox came up for sale. Now, the issue is, whenever you find them, they're not in very good condition. So, it seemed a miracle that any showed up, much less more than one. And, that was probably the first joy. Like, it was super exciting to find one locally. I could drive over and buy it. It wasn't super expensive, but it wasn't cheap for sure. But then there's the realization, like, oh, someone painted it, just took a can of spray paint and painted it blue. And actually I ended up buying 3 of these. So this is technically the second one I bought, and it had glue smeared all over the front and rear, intentionally, not just, an accident in assembly. And, that's really one of the first things I wanted to talk about is most of these aren't made very well, or were raced and, have weird modifications. But it's risky. I really wasn't sure if I'd be able to, one, get it apart enough to be able to, make it look presentable. And I was. So I felt I was pretty lucky. But there was some risk involved. I'm like, yeah, this whole body could be ruined. And, you need to balance out your understanding of what skills you have for modeling. And mine, I would say, are average or, pretty modest. I know there's some guys that can fix almost anything, and I'm not there. So you need to understand that. But you also need to balance it out with the rarity and the condition and parts availability. So, with this one, I got lucky. I was pretty pleased. I didn't want to paint it, but I ended up painting it, and I'm glad I did. And this one was also in pretty rough shape, but I didn't think I could get it apart, get all the clear plastic out of it, and really do a good job painting it. So in that case, I decided to, because of my sort of average skills, I decided to, look, I'm just going to make it, as good as I can with a pretty decent effort. I know I could have spent more time cleaning up some areas on it, probably made it look a little better. But I just decided I'm going to do, a reasonable job, and hopefully it'll come out looking, fairly acceptable. And had I known it would look like this when I started, I would have been pretty pleased. So just, you need to understand the risks involved. Now, these are much harder to find than some of the other Cox slot cars. So I was willing to get these, even though they weren't in the greatest condition and had, some major issues. So you need to balance that out too with, the price, the condition, and how rare they are. So, but you'll notice, I said I had 3 of these. So I guess that's the second experience, was they're like potato chips. If you get one, you can't have just one. You're going to need more. It's going to be a parts car. It's going to be something. And, they just keep multiplying like rabbits. So that was not a surprise, but it's hard just to have one. So I said I have a third Chaparral 2D, and it's still a project. So that's a good example of, it seems like there's always something you need. It's always some little piece, the right wheel, if you want to restore it that way, some little piece of the frame or chassis, maybe a body piece, clear plastic, a window or something like that. But, you know, there's always some little extra tidbit you're looking for. So I have another one of these bodies. It's all painted. Actually looks really nice. But I need the clear plastic pieces. Now, the good news is there's a lot of support for these Cox cars. There's a lot of interest. And Cox must have made millions of spare parts back in the 60s. So there's a lot of stuff out there. But one little piece that's missing, and you're kind of, you know, stuck in the, you know, right where you are for however long it takes you to track that down. But, you know, there are guys making reproduction pieces. Like this isn't one, but they make some of the clear plastic pieces, other body pieces. These decals that I've used are reproduction, sold on eBay, and also the tires. And they make really high quality ones, just like the originals, with the same lettering on the outside. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff that you need for these that you can track down, but every now and then there's that one little tidbit, and it's just, you're going to have to wait for it. And, you know, it might take you a while to find it, or hopefully someone else needs it and they make some for themselves, and kind of that there's extra for you. Another interesting item is the Cox cars are really great because they have these driver figures in them. A lot of the slot cars of the period, they'd really just have a little flat tray with a driver's head or something like that. But you have a complete driver figure. Well, that means you got to paint it. You know, they usually came in one color, and, you know, you're painting it, a lot of fine lines. A lot of people, the helmet has the strap for the goggles going around the back. That's especially challenging. You know, with the right tools, you know, some really fine brushes and just a couple different color paints, you can make the drivers look halfway decent. You know, I know he's hard to see, but in here, I had to repaint him in, you know, it was really good practice for me. I know he's not the greatest, but, you know, he's sort of obscured a little bit in the car, and that's good enough for me. But, you know, that might be a challenge for some people, but it's not too difficult. And with a little practice, you know, you can make them look decent. You know, this is, you know, my intent isn't to make this national model car quality build. It's to make it good enough so it looks good on a racetrack. But, you know, that's something you need to be prepared for. It's a bit of a challenge. It's something different that, you know, you don't get into in a lot of model cars. So they made millions of these cars. So they were super popular back when they were new. And, you know, they're still popular today because they were so cool. You know, the packaging is neat. And you'll find everything from, you know, a brand new unbuilt kit to, you know, a total glue bomb, or, you know, some rolling disaster like this one. Now, I bought this orange and black Chaparral for parts, but you're going to find them, you know, in every kind of condition. And, you know, you need to be able to assess with your modeling skills and what you're buying, you know, whether you can bring this back to, you know, something that you're comfortable with. It doesn't matter how good it is. It just has to be acceptable to you. So the good news is they're still popular. So there's still a lot of support, and, you know, it really helps when you go to fix one of these up. Now, this was an interesting little thing, and it's a good example of what can happen to you. Now, this is pretty much a brand new kit that was unbuilt. Someone had taken the body and painted it. You can see on the other side it was gold and like a maroon, and I could not strip the paint. So I repainted the body in British Racing Green, and I was pretty happy with that. I thought that looked really good. And then, you know, out of the blue, my buddy contacts me and says, hey, do you want a brand new body kit for a Lotus 40? And I was like, oh, that's perfect. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this body kit, take the brand new unpainted body, and put it in with, you know, the rest of this kit. So that'll be complete. It'll be a complete unbuilt kit, but it won't be sealed. It won't be sealed up. And then with my painted one, I'll take the rest of the parts in this body kit, because it has the chrome, it has the clear plastic pieces, even has the decals. And after 60 years, I'm not sure how good the decals are going to be. But it's a good example of, you know, I was really happy with this kit with the painted body. You know, it looked really good, but I could improve it. And, you know, something comes along and it's like, oh, I should take advantage of this. Well, now I've got two of them. In my parts car here, I took the wheels off of it. I needed the chaparral wheels that were on it. And I'll take the chassis and, you know, create basically a brand new car, almost brand new car with it. But now it's another project. It's another car I need to build, and I need to track down the right wheels and the right driver figure, probably get reproduction tires for it. And that's okay, but it's another example what happens with these, you know, let's call it mission creep. You know, it just becomes more than you originally intended. And you know, that's okay. It's, you know, I was okay with it, obviously. You know, like I say, these are really cool. I really like them. It just gets kind of pricey at times. So you got to watch for, you know, mission creep. Oh, I'm just going to do one car. Well, the next thing you know, you end up with 3 or 4. And that's exactly what happened to me. And that's a good news, bad news sort of thing. Now, occasionally, you can find these sealed body kits. Now, something like the Chaparral 2D body kit. And there's been a couple out there I've seen for sale. Those are going to be expensive. But some of the cars, like the Grand Prix cars, the Ferrari, the B Arab, they can be kind of pricey, but occasionally you can find one at a decent price. And, you know, to me, that's the ultimate, especially if you find a car and it has a body on it that, you know, shows some wear, maybe was poorly built, because now you can have you know, basically build up a brand new body, use that to display the car. If you ever take it on the track, you know, you're removing 2 body screws. You know, you install the crappier body in a sense, and you can kind of have the best of both worlds. And it's kind of funny because the body kits might seem kind of pricey, but like with real cars, a lot of times you're better off starting with the best example you have. It actually becomes a little more cost effective than starting out with a more affordable one. So in other words, sometimes the least expensive car you get ends up costing you the most in the long run. A good example might be this Chaparral that I bought for parts. Now, I took the driver figure out of it for one of my Chaparral 2Ds. I'm going to use the chassis on the Lotus. I use the Chaparral wheels on one of my Chaparral 2Ds. And, you know, I could probably restore this body. The body mounts were broken off. It's not in too bad of a shape. But I just decided it was better off getting a nicer one. And this one isn't perfect. And what I really like about this one is it's made probably pretty much how I would have made it if I was, say, 12 or 13 years old. You know, built it right out of the box. Minimal detailing, painting on the driver. You know, just put the decals on and let it go. And, you know, it's all original, still has the original wheels, the dried up original tires. So with some reproduction tires, hopefully I can get that up and running and running on the track. And, you know, that saves me a whole lot of time and effort trying to strip this, you know, maybe sand it down. Even if I just painted it, masking off all these chrome pieces, which I doubt would come off. And, you know, I'd still have one with, you know, I'd have some patches there covering up those screw holes. You know, I was much better off just getting a nice one, nicer one. I mean, it's not perfect. The windscreen's broken up. There's a little chip. But that'll be great. That'll be great for me to run on a track. And again, you know, my expectations for a car I'm going to put on the track aren't really high. They doesn't have to be perfect. So of course, everyone wants to know the expense. And, that's hard to determine. I found one Chaparral 2D, bought another one later. And they weren't cheap to begin with. I think the first one was $100, and you're going to be hovering right around there for a sort of good to marginal used one. But kind of the summary is, these are going to be more expensive than most other slot cars, especially the new ones you'll buy. The new ones I think are fantastic, and it's probably the more affordable way to go. But it's still going to be cheaper than a lot of other hobbies, like remote control airplanes and helicopters and, some of the nicer model railroading things. But it can add up. You're going to have to pay attention to your expenses. So that's the best summary I can come up with. Now, collectors are looking for items, like this, brand new, never used, maybe still sealed. More like this unbuilt kit. But, most of these cars, like I say, they made millions of them. I think this Chaparral, I think they made over 1 million just of this model. But most of them were made, and most of them were ran pretty hard too. So, and this is a good example. This one was, painted up weirdly. You can actually see a lot of brush strokes in the paint, so it doesn't have the greatest build quality. And then, it's the mounts are busted. You're going to find everything from something that's, perfect, for lack of a better term, to in really, really sad shape. So, what I was really looking for is that sort of, sweet spot between, perfect and totally used up, nicely used, hopefully all the original parts on it, maybe showing some wear. So that's what I was looking for. And, that's something I can work with. Now, this is a good example because this front windscreen is broken, and I think I'm going to leave it that way because if you look really closely, like right here where it's glued, there's just a ton of glue on there. And I think I would have a heck of a time getting that off without breaking something. And, I'd probably have to get in there and get in with a Dremel eventually and grind out all the little bits and pieces. And I could probably do that. I really just don't want to put the time in it. I really don't want to restore that car. It's sort of nice enough for me to use on the track. I'd prefer to have the interior painted the same color as the side decal, because the real car was fiberglass, and that's the original gel coat color, and that was pretty much the interior of the car was the same color, that and a flat black. So I prefer the interior painted, the driver a little more detail, but it's good enough for what I want to do with it. So one thing I want to mention is I'm always fumbling around with some of these little bits and pieces on it, like these acorn nuts on the axle. Now, they give you this nice little wrench where you can get in there, but before you do that, you have to start this acorn nut on the axle. And the front one I can manage pretty easily, but the one on the back, I just can't, hold it enough and get that nut started. And I don't know what it is about these cars, but it seems like there's always something like that I'm fumbling around with, and I drop it 3 times. And, I finally got smart, make sure I hold it over a table or something, so I'm not looking on the ground for, some little spring or nut or bolt or something like that. So, and, I would put all these little things I'm fumbling around with, an ease of assembly, sort of access to being able to build it. And a really good example is the body is held on with 2 screws to the chassis. So there's one on the back, boy, you can get that, see it from a mile away. But the one on the front is hidden under this drop arm. Now you can raise this drop arm a little bit, but hopefully I can get this where you can see it. You need to put a screwdriver in here at an angle. And you know, you can get in there and do it. It's really awkward. So, you know, that's just another experience of these Cox cars. And, you know, assembling and detailing the body, you know, some paint details on it to make it look decent. You know, there's nothing really exceptionally difficult about it, except, you know, there isn't a lot of, you know, aids to help you put it together. Like this hood scoop, you know, has no little tab that it sits in. So, you know, there's a lot of variation. And actually, if you look at this one closely, it's actually a little too far back. It should be scooched forward a little bit. But the worst one is putting in the clear plastic pieces. And you'll almost always find these when they've been built to have glue smears on the clear plastic pieces, because there's no little tabs or little pins that fit in a hole that hold them in place or locate them. Like this side glass, you're supposed to put adhesive on the edges, and that's what holds it in place. Well, there's nothing that really holds it in place. And, you know, it's just a lot more difficult to assemble than it should be. You know, if I was designing it, I would have put little clear tabs on the inside. It wouldn't have taken much. Have the window installed from the inside, and boom, you wouldn't get any smears. It would hold it in place while you're building it. So it's just, you got to be a little more careful putting these together. Like say, I'm sort of always fumbling with stuff, little bits and pieces, and you know, it just seems a lot harder than it should be. You know, it's not impossible, but you know, you're going to feel a little bit clumsy doing some of this stuff, and you need to be sort of extra careful. And then you'll also be a little bit frustrated by you know, just being able to get in a screwdriver to, you know, tighten or loosen something. So just you know, we put a lot more thought into that stuff nowadays. So to me, that really stands out as something a little different, that, you know, you were dealing with something 60 years old. We don't run into it that much today. So I was really starting this, and I was wondering what to say on whether you know, some guy with average modeling skills, if he could restore these and revive them. And I think for the most part, yes, they could. They made millions of these, and you know, a lot of them you find in really, really bad shape, and you might not want to dive into that. It really might not be worth the trouble. But you know, if you get one that's sort of in reasonable condition, and it doesn't have to be perfect, I think someone could really have a lot of fun getting one of these back on the track. And like in this case, for me, I'm accepting, you know, the condition. There's still some stuff that could probably make this look even better. But, you know, for me, it's a car intended for the track, so it doesn't really have to be perfect. But, you know, I want everyone to understand there is a little risk involved. I mean, it can be really fun, really rewarding, but, you know, it might not always work out. And you know, these are a little bit more expensive than your average slot car. And of course, you know, if you start with something that's, you know, still brand new after 60 years, you know, I think you could have something really exceptional then. But that gets a little bit more expensive. So, you know, hopefully people find this interesting. Maybe it helps some people thinking about doing it. But I think, you know, it can be a lot of fun. And, you know, if you have any experience doing this, I'd love to hear your opinion. If you have any experience with these cars, you know, back in the 60s, that would be great. Just, you know, leave something in the comment section. And as always, thanks for watching.